Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our annual NAB Wrap-Up. I don't know, Paul, do you have any figure on which wrap-up this is? 82nd?
347.
Yeah, well, SMPTE is 100 years old, so I don't know, it's somewhere between 50 and 100, I think. But yeah, we've been doing this wrap-up for quite a while, and when I started going to NAB, it was strictly a broadcaster show. You'd go in and you'd see Ampex and Sony and the gigantic VTRs and huge cameras and a lot of television transmitters. So a lot has happened. This was about my 36th NAB. And, but every year from the first year, there were a lot of things changing, and it's even more so now as our technology seems to be accelerating. We even saw 8K, which was pretty amazing. The Japanese planned to do the 2020 Olympics in 8K, and I saw several working cameras from various manufacturers. Pretty impressive. That's a lot of data coming out of there. So good luck to them handling it. A lot of 4K, of course, which I guess is going to become the de facto standard pretty soon. And of course the transition to IP, high dynamic range, wide color gamut. So we have a lot to talk about. We have two newbies on our panel tonight. We're fortunate to have Stefan Hattel, the Director of Engineering from WCVB. We have John Rule from Boston Camera, and Merrick Feldmar from WGBH, Channel 2. And new also is Jeffrey Poyster from Boston University, and someone who's been with us for years, Bob Lamb of Broadcast Pick. So we have all of these different perspectives. We have manufacturer, we have vendors, we have educators, and we have broadcasters. So it should be an interesting session. And we're very fortunate to have again Phil Ozek from Liberty Mutual as our moderator. Before yes, he deserves a hand, absolutely. Year after year, he's steadfast, and a former chair as well. Before we move on to tonight's session, I want to point out that we have another big event coming up, big SMPTE event, and it's on the 19th of this month, and it is an all-day series of workshops. We're calling it a boot camp, and we haven't done anything like this since the advent of HD. We were originally going to call it a 4K boot camp, but we decided with everything going on, we would call it a new technologies boot camp, because it's going to cover everything from high resolution to high dynamic rate to wide color gamut to IP, and how you make IP talk nicely to SDI, and how you make the various types of IP talk nicely to each other, and much more. And we've lined up an all-star cast that will include Sony's Chief Technical Officer, Hugo Gagione, Tektronix' Carl Kuhn, Grass Valley's Bruce Lane, JVC's Al Cornack, Everett's Microsystems' Paul Briscoe, Mark Bergeron from Panasonic, John Scheike from Snell, SAM, formerly Snell and Wilcox, Pete Putman, the noted display consultant, and last but not least, Mark Shubin. And he was with us last year. Mark has quite an engineering background, is the engineer in charge of the Metropolitan Opera, including their broadcasts, Sesame Street, and Great Performances. So that's going to be running from 9 to 9 at the Dedham Holiday Inn on the 19th. It'll be just pretty much continuous with one short break at 5 o'clock. So there's no RSVP needed. Tell your friends. If you're at a station, let everyone know. We really, with this kind of lineup, we really would like to have a good showing there. So again, that's the 19th at the Dedham Holiday Inn. And now it's my pleasure to turn the evening over to Phil Ozek. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you all. So I made a last-minute decision to step from behind the podium to get out here, and I'd like to make this really interactive tonight. If you have questions during the discussion and you catch my eye, I'll go over to you with the microphone. So let's try to just keep it, as lively as possible. Always good to do the NAB wrap up, to reconnect with people who I haven't seen in a year. It's become more difficult for me to attend SMPTE meetings with other responsibilities, so it's always good to see good friends here. Anyway, welcome. So, does anyone remember what our predictions were last year as we ended the NAB wrap up? This is something I always want to try to look at last year's tapes, which I don't have. Paul, you have last year's tapes. So, does anyone remember what last year's predictions were? We always end with predictions. Yes, no?
None that will admit to
No.
it.
Okay. I think it was drones. Maybe it was drones, something to do with drones. Anyway, we'll get to predictions at the end of the discussion here. We do have somewhat of a formula that I tend to use. I like to ask everyone on the panel, what was the theme of this year's show? NAB tends to have themes, or one year it was 3D, another year it was drones, cameras, high def, and so forth. 4K. I think 4K was last year, where there was a lot of emphasis on 4K. So let's start in the middle with you, Emmerich. What's your thoughts on the theme of this year's NAB?
The most prevalent theme was IP everything. The Internet of Things. I was waiting to find the IP office chair, because it's everything. It was IP, and that was the big buzz. Drones don't have a sweet spot in my heart because I got tired of them last year. But it's like, okay, another way to lift the camera. But what I was impressed with this year is the amount of things, accessories for drones. Everything, the ways to hold the cameras and keep them smooth. And, the tethered drones were impressive. Like, okay, you got a drone that just stays in the air all day and night.
It just loiters there.
It just loiters there, so you don't have to power, no batteries to change. And RF systems for drones, so you can go live with a drone. So to me, the story was drones were everywhere, but it was more about the applications for drones. Although I miss a shot that you just frame and hold. Everything seems like it has to rotate around your head in a drone. So same with GoPro. And then HDR, 4K HDR was very prevalent this year in monitoring and cameras and acquisition. I saw a lot about, and then the last thing from a broadcast is ATSC 3.0 was a big topic in the circles I was traveling in.
Okay, very good. So, Bob Lamb, from your perspective, what would the theme, kind of overarching theme? You don't have to go through everything you saw there, but what do you think was the main theme?
I would say the big theme was that now we are moving from the computer to the cloud. So before we were computerizing everything, now we are connecting all these computerized stations with the cloud, and that provides some very nice capabilities. For example, being able to back up a remote system on the cloud, so if it fails, you can immediately, reload the media on it. Ability of someone in a control area to be able to remotely control and put proper stuff on remote systems without having to go there. When I first heard about it, I sort of thought like, meh, but then I noticed these are features people like.
Yeah. What about you, Stefan? What are your thoughts?
Well, Emmerich stole all the thunder for the broadcaster. And everything on my list.
I know, the two broadcast guys on the panel. Who approved that?
But drones definitely took up a big footprint, and I agree with the accessories that they now have for those drones. It's pretty impressive. So ATSC 3.0, actually finally seeing a broadcast actually happen after attending all the meetings and listening in on all the calls. It was kind of good to see the bits and pieces that they finally had there at the show. So that was an important thing for, I think, most broadcasters, is to kind of say, hey, you can touch and feel this thing now. It's not just standards being written up. IP, as Emmerich said, video over IP and what our future as broadcasters in the physical world.
We talked about that last year. The Internet of Things, right? So we're clearly seeing that now in the NAB space. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, everybody's looking at standards that they want to work with, off-the-shelf products, right, in the IT space. So, more and more we're migrating from the traditional broadcast movement of video and audio over an IP packetized world. And that's what ATSC 3.0 is going to bring to us as well.
John Roll, what do you think was the big story?
Well, a couple of big stories, and actually, I hadn't really thought about that, but the Internet of Things, which is sort of a larger world.
Your toaster has an IP.
Yeah, and there was definitely some of that. There was I was really excited about some batteries this year that had a wireless interface to them, and the big thing for me was sort of a affirmation of what I've been seeing for a while, which is that we're not necessarily, manufacturers aren't necessarily on the cycle of coming up with a completely new product every year. Now it's sort of settled into everybody's consciousness that it's okay to do a firmware update once a year, and that will suffice. And so I saw a lot of...
Once a year, once every other week.
Well, yeah. I mean, major updates come on a more regular basis.
So that's all we needed to do?
That's it. That's it.
Now
But
we
it's I mean, it's comforting for a lot of people that you can spend your money and start depreciating a product that you buy, and 6 months later, you get an update and it makes it better than the product that you originally bought, and I think that's really cool.
Just send money.
No,
No,
free.
no.
Everything's free now, Emmerich.
Only if it's a .0 update, then you gotta send the money, you know?
Yeah.
It's
But for me, the real manifestation of that was that, you know, every year I go looking for digital cinema cameras, and there were no digital cinema cameras from any major manufacturer that were announced at the show. So there was a couple of pre-announcements, but there was no unveiling at the show, and to me that was really a shocking thing.
why was that?
Because it's never happened before. So for Panasonic, Arri, Red, Sony, Blackmagic, none of them had a big reveal at the show, and but everybody had substantive updates.
I see, I got you, okay.
Canon add to that list, so it was shocking. It was almost as if there was collusion, which of course would
Which will be hard to prove, right?
yeah, right.
Jeffrey, what do you think? You know, and I think it's the first time we had someone from academia represented on the panel here, so please.
I hope I don't make you want to make it the last. Yeah, I teach in a film and television department at BU. So the age group I see the most often is around 20 years old. So I go to NAB to try to see the future. And I think it's one of the best places where you can get a sense of that. I'd have to agree with my colleague here about the cloud being a transformative technology, but also a concept. And what I'm looking at is to see where the technology is going to take the way people use entertainment and news and those things.
How they consume it, or how they
Yeah,
produce
how they
it?
consume it. You know, when, we'll just throw this out, one day I just decided to ask my students, where do you guys get your news? They said Twitter.
Really? Because Twitter's stock's in the tank right now, so
Yeah.
I'm just...
Well,
But-
that explains Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, it kind of scared me. At the same time, though, I realized that, you know, young people are being connected by instantaneous devices that they carry with them, and it's transforming the whole concept of how we watch television, how we see movies, and you know, it's pretty obvious what I'm talking about because we've seen it. There's, you know, Netflix and Vimeo and all of these ways for people to access content. And just to point out one thing, you know, I went to a press conference led by Ericsson, and they're working on a global access catalog, and their vision is that they have 1 million movies now that you can dial up and access. And what I'm seeing is that all of this IP and talk and, you know, is actually pretty significant in terms of how it's going to change the way we experience, produce, disseminate media.
So I think, you know, one of the terms I haven't heard is mobile, right? We've heard cloud, we've heard IP, IT, and so forth, but mobile is huge. the explosion of mobile devices and how people get information, it's clearly, you know, mobility here. That had to be a big theme at NAB. I would assume the mobile solutions for disseminating information.
Well, it's where the whole spectrum auction is driving that whole thing, you know, there's getting to the point where now they're gonna auction off broadcast spectrum so there's more capability for bandwidth for mobile.
What's the timeline for that, or do you know?
Well, technically, it's the reverse auction's underway now, stations has expressed their interest. Pretty soon is when the, you know, I don't know what, it keeps changing, it's happening now, though, it's in the silent period now, so you can't talk about what your plans are. So
Okay.
there can be no collusion, they don't, so, okay, so, actually, so the fallout of that from NAB was things like, okay, it's gonna happen, but now there aren't enough tall tower crews in the country to replace all the RF systems and all the towers. There aren't, you know, the transmitter manufacturers, all the equipment and the crews to do spectrum auction and repacking. There aren't enough resources. Have you seen that?
Correct.
Yeah, that's a problem. That's gonna be, you know, doesn't matter what the FCC says.
So there's no young people in the pipeline being trained for these positions?
That's a whole other issue.
That's all, yeah, well,
Yeah, beyond NAB, but, you know, there are 15 tall tower crews in the country, some ridiculously small number, and, you know, that had a lot of conversations at NAB about, okay, we can't talk about spectrum auction, but let's talk about how we're gonna get it done when they FCC, okay, you have 1 year to do this, whatever the number is. There aren't enough resources in the industry to get it all done all over the whole country. It's gonna be very interesting.
yeah,
You just
yeah.
gave me an idea for a program to launch that would lead to a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Tall tower,
interesting.
become a tall tower guy.
Well, can't be afraid of heights, right? So it's, you know, what's interesting here is we've got broadcast represented, we've got, you know, production house, rental represented, manufacturer, education. So one of the things I like to do is kind of examine the towers, if you will, and focus on what was specific in those areas. So John, why don't we start with you from your view of what you were looking for out at NAB? What really piqued your interest for your business and your solutions that you're looking for?
Sure. So I was looking for, obviously, cameras first and foremost. That's my usual focus. But this year, I was not interested in ATSC 3.0. I'm sorry. I feel bad.
Shame on you.
Honestly, I'm not either, actually. That's another story.
It's true, it's coming.
Yeah. But I was very interested in HDR, so it was a mission for me to sort of figure out not only how.
So explain for the audience, for those that don't know, when you say HDR, what do you mean by that?
Sure. So it's a high dynamic range, and it's basically, you know, we've had cameras that shoot and can capture a huge dynamic range right now. You know, 14, 15 stops of latitude between the darkest point in the picture and the lightest point in the picture, and that's great that we can capture that. But most of the time, nobody ever sees that because it doesn't. It sort of stops. It doesn't go all the way through the chain to the home. And now we're at the point where monitors are getting to a certain brightness where they can start to reproduce that full dynamic range. And manufacturers are talking about how exciting it would be to sell all of us new TV sets that can reproduce that high dynamic range. And
this started in still photography like a dozen years ago, and now it's migrating into full motion pictures.
Yeah.
I mean, is that a fair assessment?
yeah. Yeah, in stills it was done with multiple exposures.
Right.
And now they're doing it with log curves when you're shooting. And so what I saw was a lot of bits and pieces in the whole pipeline that were leading people to have it be relatively painless to go through the HDR pipeline. And some of the displays I saw were getting pretty good. You know, when you're talking about 1,000 nits, 1,500 nits for production monitors, all of a sudden you can really start to do HDR. And I saw some shiny examples and some not so shiny examples. But I think it's something that as a rental facility, it's something that I need to start presenting to our customers because they're going to start to have to deal with it.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting is my first job out of college was at Raytheon, and they had a full production suite. And in the middle of it was I think it was I don't know, 20-inch diagonal Ikegami color monitor. And my former colleague Don's in the audience there, and that was the ultimate display to get your colors and your contrast and brightness correct. But HDR takes it to a whole new level.
Yeah, and mostly it's because when you're standing a certain distance away from a 4K screen, the benefits of 4K sort of fade away due to the vagaries of human eye resolution. So that resolution is not something everybody can see. Peter wants to just jump in and talk about this, I just know it. But with HDR, it's something that everybody can see, everybody can remark on, and no matter where you are in the room, you can see it, and it's a much more pleasing picture. So it's something that has obvious benefits to the consumer for once.
Right.
And I think that's really great. So we're going to see a lot more of that.
So Bob, from the manufacturer's point of view, what were you taking away from the show? I mean, you're with Broadcast Picks. You guys sell digital mixers.
Here's $1 for that commercial.
I didn't say they were good.
Don't you guys
Wait a
have one
second.
of them?
No, wait a second. I didn't say they were good. They're excellent.
Nice.
All right. So seriously though, from what we've seen in technology is things get better, they get less expensive, you can sell more of better product. I mean, so what's the trend that you're seeing in your space?
I think, to put it a very general way, it's the increased computerization of our field. But specifically what's happening is you look at some of these new transmission ways. For example, this NDI thing that has come out for sending a lot of signals over. People are now routinely expecting to send their camera signals using streaming and so forth. And so really the infrastructure that are connecting, let's say a switcher to the cameras and to all the other devices, isn't a coax cable anymore, it's an Ethernet cable.
RJ45 connector,
Yeah,
right?
and the thing is we are putting, video is plopping really absolutely into the domain of the IT coordinator. And more what I am encountering is that when somebody wants to do a video facility, instead of thinking that they're going to hire a video engineer, even if they're going to do something complicated like a multi-camera, facility, they turn to the IT guy. And that's because he's in charge of the streaming already a little bit, the servers.
So why the camera shots have a lot of headroom.
Yeah, it's why they have compression artifacts and sort of like things like, the audio being perfectly in sync is sort of like, that's all right. But I think that this whole business is becoming very much a subset of IT. And in addition, the people who want to use our equipment are very much people with other jobs. It's the sales manager or the person who's in charge of meetings in the conference room or whatever, who wants to do this, and they want to be able to get tools that, if they can't figure it out, they want them and their IT coordinator to be able to figure it out. And when they use it, they want it to be very easy to use, something that they can have the receptionist do at night, or perhaps someone in the office who's free that night.
Yeah, so it's the iPhone effect, right? The iPhone simplified the use of a computer essentially, and there's this expectation among users now that everything has to be or should be that easy to use.
And they're right.
Well, they are
Customer's
right.
always right.
Of course, well, one could argue that, I guess, but that's what they tell me. What else?
To me?
Yeah.
Well, when I was in college, the calculator was a new thing. And gradually it became
That was called the slide rule, wasn't it?
I'm not that old.
Oh, Jesus.
But the first calculators, they all competed by having more and more computational ability. And then all of a sudden they broke into 5 zillion different categories. There were special calculators with big buttons for people who were like elderly and needed to see the buttons. There were special calculators that would do things like, sports stuff and whatever. A little bit like we have now sort of with watches that keep track of how much you've run. And I think we're sort of in this situation with video, that instead of thinking of our devices as video devices, we really have to think of them as appliances for people with other jobs. And the more that we can customize these devices and make them provide a user experience that is natural and intuitive and still does everything they want, that's the direction this is going.
So that's interesting, because yesterday I read an article in which GoPro released 2 apps yesterday. And, you know, they're getting killed in the appliance market, if you will, by Sony and all these other upstarts that are coming out with GoPro-like devices. So they've seen, you know, they've kind of seen the writing on the wall. They're looking at software as their savior, if you will. And they released 2 apps yesterday, and it'll be interesting to see how far that moves them forward. But let's transition now to, yeah, go ahead,
The
Emma.
other thing that I saw coming this year was VR.
You know, I was waiting for
Should I
someone to
wait?
say that, but go ahead.
So at GBH, Frontline is actually, I suppose I can say this, Frontline has a contract with Facebook to do a VR segment for 10 shows and post it, right? So they've been, and they gave them a budget, which they spent on their very first show of 10. So it's been interesting. But what they found was that there's a lot of rigs out there now, you know, with, you know, cameras around, all around and up and down. And the hardest part was how do you stitch it together after and make it into something you can edit. And that's been a real challenge. But I saw a lot of VR activity, a lot of arrays of cameras and the software to now take the raw video from 12 cameras or whatever it is and make it into something you can edit and use. And then the other interesting part to me, which I never thought of, was how to tell a story in VR, because if I have a VR set, and if you're trying to tell a story, and I'm going like this, looking at the birds, and something is happening over there, the viewer doesn't know, he misses it, because he's looking behind him. So how do you make VR push the viewer to look where you want him to look, not just, you know, doing the head in the air thing? So I was intrigued by the VR stuff this year. There was more than ever of it.
Well, and Google's embracing VR in a huge way on YouTube. So just the other day, the landing of Elon Musk's SpaceX rocket on the sea platform there, that was recorded in VR. It's on YouTube now. If you get a chance, check it out. I mean, you can manipulate the whole field of view. You can go all over. You can go up, down, left, right. It's pretty amazing.
Why do you
On
think it's
YouTube.
gonna be that much different than 3D?
I never was a 3D fan. I honestly find it fatiguing to watch. I think it's a novelty myself, but it will be a novelty and people will go to it. I mean, I went to PBS TechCon pre-NAB, a separate thing, and they were handing out Google Cardboard to everybody.
Yep.
You know, here, try this, and you know, and go online, and it's pretty cool. But I don't know if I want to watch a whole movie going like this, looking and see what's around me. I don't know. It's
I think they announced Oculus Rift was being released at Best Buy this week for sale. So does anyone have their order in for the Oculus
I
Rift?
think it's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has its application, like if you're in a media business where you're a magazine company or something like that, and you want to sell a travel type of experience to someone. In the broadcast world, I mean, I don't see us doing that, right? And telling the story and keeping people focused at the key part of the story, it's hard to do in that space. But if you're a gamer, or if you're, you know, a travel agency trying to show off, you know, the Great Wall of China, it gives you a perspective that you never got to see before, right?
Yeah, there's
So, I mean, the
already
technology has its place.
some luxury automobile manufacturers that are going to be using that to give people a virtual, you know, ride in their luxury vehicles.
Yeah,
I
so
think-
it's an experience type of a thing, more so than
Right.
you know, sit down and watch.
So is there an opportunity there to create VR content for these applications?
Yeah, and that was the second thing that I really wanted to go find out about at NAB, because I think that, you know, from a larger perspective, we're on the very cusp of something huge. I think that VR is a brand new medium, and I think it's one that is going to be with us for a long, long time, unlike 3D. And I think that you know, when Emmerich is talking about the inability for a director to focus people's attention in certain places is something that we're going to start to see develop over the next year or so. And it makes me think about that movie theater in Paris 100 years ago when when the first motion picture was shown and there was a train coming towards the audience, and everybody freaked out and jumped out
Yeah.
because they thought they were going to get killed. And the visual language evolves over time. You know, somebody invented a dissolve to get you from one place to another, and at first people were confused about it, but now we don't even see a dissolve. It's just there.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be happening a lot with VR. We rent VR rigs now, and
Who
it's
does?
we do. At Rule Boston Camera. Thank you.
Shameless plug.
He's the best.
Yes,
He really is.
Can I just ask who is renting them? Who's your customer?
At the moment, it's I think it's mostly experimental. So every small production company wants to try it, just to be able to get some experience and maybe figure out how to sell it to their clients. But we've done a bunch of documentary work with them, and I think that is where right now there's a direct application for documentary work, and I think ABC
Like
News
Frontline.
and Frontline are doing some pioneer work, because you know what better place for something immersive like VR than a documentary, to be in a place where something horrendous or wonderful has just happened, and to be there.
So how much does simplicity play into that? I mean, if the tool is hard to use and it's hard to produce, then are people really going to use it? So are companies focused on, you know, the automation aspects of it? You know, where it's you got the camera, it's automatically stitched. I mean, is that a big part of what you're looking for?
That's the next generation, which is really expensive right now. So like Nokia has this OXO camera, which is a really nice camera, but it's $60,000. And it's that much because it solves a lot of the problems that we have with your basic GoPro rigs right now, that you know, that have a lot of cameras that are unconnected.
I went to NAB and Panasonic showed one that should come in under 20,000 that sketches live of VR.
Yeah, and I saw, I mean, there's a camera being featured on B&H Photo Video's website. It's the Opria, I think it's called.
I think I know the one you're
You know
talking
what
about,
I'm
yeah.
talking about? And
Yeah.
there's a lot of buzz about that. It's about $2,000. It's not crazy expensive like that, but.
Yeah, and I saw it, and the resolution just wasn't there for me. But it's a really quickly evolving
Such a
space.
resolution snob. Yeah, so I'll come to you, but let me take a question from John.
Do you see visual reality at all migrating into feature films?
It depends on the psychophysical response, because right now, most of us couldn't stand to watch it for more than 10 minutes, you know, depending on lag time and resolution and things like that. But I can see a future where it is so good and so immersive that you would be more than happy to spend an hour or two in that kind of environment.
What building would you be in?
You mean,
Would it be a movie theater?
oh, no, probably not. And that's really an evolution of how, you know, to get to the question about mobile, all of our viewing experiences are becoming much more personal. We're no longer sitting in rooms with people anyway. So this is just one more step in that evolution. Yeah. Yeah, and there's certainly times when you want to be with other people watching a movie, but more and more we're happy to watch movies on our phones.
So, two things. One, it seems to me that VR is really more like a gaming experience, and it would be more connected to gaming. But secondly, I'm wondering, VR, is it mostly where you're sitting in one position and watching it, and it's moving around, or is there also VR where you move and you actually get to turn in the space? So it's you know, it's 360 degrees and you can decide what you're looking at. And so in other words, it's sort of like augmented reality.
So I would say it's the latter, and that's clearly where things are going. So you know, I gave my daughter one of those Google Cardboard things, and it uses the sensor in the phone to detect where your head is positioned and so forth. So it actually moves according to your position.
So the recording devices are recording 360 degrees?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And in fact, the YouTube video that I mentioned earlier of the SpaceX rocket, if you look at that on an iPad and you move the iPad around, it will change the point of view. So
Yeah.
it's pretty cool stuff.
And just briefly, I did see one VR experience that totally changed my mind about the future of it, and it was an event. It was a boxing match, and it was done with a red camera array, so super high resolution, in stereo, and it was it was a boxing match, and I'm standing like in the corner basically watching this, and it was so visceral and so exciting and real. You could feel the punches, and that's never anything I had experienced before in 3D and in pay-per-view flat TV. It was really, really exciting. So I could see a concert or a concert. Sorry.
The punches weren't landing on you, were they?
They felt like they were. I could feel the sweat of the fighters landing on my brow.
So has anyone here been to the IMAX 3D theater in Reading? So they have IMAX laser projection there. I'm just wondering if
Not to Reading, no.
Not to Reading? So,
There's also one in Avon.
is it laser in Avon as well? I thought Reading was the only one that had the 3D laser.
I think you're right, I think it's like one of 4 in the country.
Right, right. I haven't been there, I haven't, so I was just wondering if someone had it, what their thoughts of it were.
What are you doing after the meeting, Phil?
What's that?
Laser projection, not just laser lights.
That's correct, yeah. 3D laser projection. So IMAX, yep.
I just want to make a comment.
Yeah.
So we've been using at our production company for upwards of 6 months. We have a Rift that we've been a developer for. We also have Gear VR. We have a Heroes 360 rig with 6 GoPros. It's probably the baby brother to what Rule has.
Product called Omni, I think it was, GoPro Omni.
It's a new.
Yeah, that's the new, right. Well, what I was going to say is probably a couple of points. One, the holy grail so far has been the stitching. And one of the biggest problems from a production standpoint is to preview for the director what the hell they're going to shoot. Is there a light stand in the way? Are the actors or, are props where they're supposed to be? How is it going to look when it's stitched? And there are some cameras that are coming out, some people mentioned it already, that are going to be much cheaper, fairly high res, 6 cameras, in camera, zero latency stitching that you will get. I'm not sure what the data is, what the stream is, and so forth. The other thing, the last point I wanted to make is nobody mentions audio, and audio I think is extremely important when you're talking about VR or AR. And what we've discovered, we've been experimenting with holophonic microphones that look like a human head with all sorts of capsules embedded in that. And what Emma, you mentioned before about, how do you get their attention? Where do they look? Where is the stage? With audio, we've discovered that through audio you can actually institute positional cues subliminally. So you can actually redirect and refocus somebody to look in a certain way from just what they're hearing, because what we're experimenting with is 360 sound, so you can hear sound in back of you, crossing and back with actual depth all around you. And we've been probably have tried 5 or 6 different microphone systems and headsets and so forth.
So did any of you folks see anything at NAB for 3D, for immersive audio, VR audio? I thought I saw some things on some of the blogs today, but
I didn't spend anything.
I thought it was neat, but I wish I had more. That's why I wish I had more time. You only can see so much.
right. We had another question up here. You still have it?
No, it's more of a comment. Just in regards to what you had asked regarding the 3D experience up at Reading at that theater. I've seen the Force Awakens movie like 3 times. Okay, and Force Awakens, the new Star Wars movie. So my wife and I had seen it in 2D, and then we saw it at the 3D showing up there, and we were really amazed because we've seen 3D movies before, and it's not our favorite, but because of the added resolution of that particular theater, we're able to see things and experience things, and maybe this is partly due to how they shot the film and brought everything together, but the immersive feeling that's been discussed was much more in-depth for us in that particular showing versus other 3D movies with maybe something that doesn't have quite the same resolution or punch. But we were really sucked into the whole film visually, and that made it much more enjoyable for us. Not to take anything away from the 2D, that is still our preference, but for an experience. But as you guys, some of the gentlemen have mentioned up here on the panel tonight, in regards to like what the newer or current upcoming generations are typically accustomed to viewing media, how they are going to be immersed into these resolutions. Like I just see the ramp of what they're going to tolerate to be much lower tolerance, and they're going to ramp up much faster than our generations have been, where we have just been so accustomed to NTSC. So anything above that benchmark is really high.
Yeah, and that's an important point, that theater in Reading is 4K 3D laser projection. So they got all the buzzwords in there, you know. Maybe next year they'll add VR to it. I guess, you know, the question is, when are they going to become 8K, right? You know, as the resolution wars continue. Is it 4K per eye or 2K per eye? That's, you know, that's a good question, John. I don't know the answer to that. Does anyone know?
I think it's just overall resolution, picture resolution. It has nothing to do with each eye. It's just screen resolution.
A little over 2K, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. That's the biggest complaint. Same with Gear VR. That's probably.
Okay, so that's so we'll get back to VR. We'll talk a little bit more about VR, I'm sure. As I said, I wanted to kind of go through the towers here. Let's focus on broadcast for a little bit here with Stefan and Emmerich there. So you guys want to talk about what you saw that you were shopping for, if you were out there shopping? Tell us what you were looking for, you know, what really piqued your interest, and you know, what you're going to put on your wish list for your bosses to sign off on.
I had a big shopping list, a big item. We have to replace our facility routing switcher. So that's a huge purchase, you know, major event. And, you know, we did our due diligence. We went to all the vendors, and they were really, everybody was talking about how, well, you know, look at, we're an IP router. I said, great, I have no IP sources, not one. So I got to replace an HD SDI router with embedded audio, and I need to have a path to go forward with IP, because, you know, I got cameras that don't have IP. I got new production switches that aren't capable but don't have the cards. So I need to replace something for today that I can get 10 to 12 years of life out of. And as
so is that the depreciation that you have to look at that long?
A router is about 10, yeah, it's 10 years, a
Okay.
10-year purchase, and hopefully.
Yeah.
The one I have now is, it was built with 2007, was put to service, so it's about 10 years old now. And, you know, it's end of life, end of service, and I have to replace it. And nobody's really happy about that, because it's not an insignificant amount of money, you know, it's a big purchase. So I kept having to say, hang on, I understand you're ready to go IP, but I want to, but I don't have anything to use it with now, but I need, you know, I can't go back in 2 years and say, oh, I'm ready to make it IP now, I need a new router. I have to make sure what I purchase can transition to IP, and oh, by the way, I want fiber routing, and, you know, I want to make sure I as future-proof myself as I can, but I got to buy something for today that's ready for tomorrow. And everybody understood it, but they were so caught up in the IP buzzwords. It was like, I got it, yeah, you have an IP router, but it has to do other things today, and then I transition into it. So that was a challenge. And then I continue to be plagued by service contracts. I mean, that's one of my pet peeves. You know, I buy a router, I'm going to pay.
You're talking about the license models?
The cost of keeping, you know, I'm going to spend, I don't know, $500,000 on a router, and I'm going to spend $500,000 over 10 years getting support.
Yeah.
And that makes me crazy that, you know, who signed these things the first time and said it was okay to charge me 10% a year? I'm going to stop, because I can go on and on and on. So I'll stop on that. But that's a real factor, you know, because there's some serious cost in it. And then there's one vendor that has a 10-year no service contract warranty. Boy, that puts them to the top of the list, right? So that was my big purchase, and I spent a lot of time with a lot of meetings talking about, you know, a major purchase. We did a lot of, we need to replace a lot of monitoring. Monitoring is a big thing for us this year. You know, camera shading, control rooms, I still have glass, I still have tubes in the building that, are getting old and they're not gonna be replaced. So, I honestly can't afford a $10,000 OLED in every position, it's not reality. So we've been getting samples and demos, and, I think I have 5 different monitors of an OLED, I have LEDs of various things, say, okay, what do you think of this? The guys are working with them, and somebody said to me, I said to somebody the other day, in the camera shading, right, which is a pretty critical place for a quality monitor, I said, did you see the new monitor demo? It's sitting right next to the glass, and the good old-fashioned glass Ikegami. He said, no, I haven't seen it yet, but I don't like it. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, it's not glass, so it's not going to be any good. It's like, oh, so we're fighting a legacy of, well, if it's anything but what I'm used to, it's no good. So I shopped a lot, looked at a lot of monitors, looked at a lot of OLEDs. There's some beautiful stuff out there. And the prices are coming down. So, I spent a lot of time shopping it. I had some real targeted purchasing, which took away a lot of my looking at fun stuff time.
So what's more important, the OLEDs or the HDR component there?
Today it's a quality today it's a quality reference monitor that's truly a reference, that I can say that color is the color, and everybody says, yep, that's the color, because then it goes to post, and they have different monitors up in the post rooms, and we have 46 post-production rooms, and they all have different monitors in them. So, what color is it? Is it red? Is it not red? And it's a struggle every day to try to get a standard of a monitor that everybody says, yep, that looks good. And it's so subjective.
Computer displays have different calibration.
And then there's the computer displays, and you can't put a $10,000 24-inch OLED in every. Sorry, Steve, I can't.
I don't see the problem.
I know.
Buy one, get 2 free?
Yeah, buy 50, get 1 free. So, it's. I promised Steve I wouldn't slam him today. Oh, well.
He spoke up first.
He started it. So let's talk about Sony now. It's hard because the reality is there's only so much money. And don't forget, we rely on support from viewers like you. So, thank you. And thank you.
And the Koch brothers.
With support, major support, yeah,
Yes.
I got it.
Stefan, what about, what were you out there shopping for, if you were shopping?
Yeah, well, I'm knee deep in the router install. And to Emmerich's point, most television stations their infrastructure is all 1505 video cable. It's not Cat 6 or fiber between locations in a building. So when you bite off that decision to go IP, you now got to pull in all new cable infrastructure into a facility. Greenfield is obviously the best place to do that, but we have layers and layers of color-coded cabling to differentiate from analog to SDI to HD-SDI and AES, right? So once you get into the IP space, that changes to a single cable, but nobody's ready for that. So it's a matter of planning your future. So I'm putting in an HD-SDI baseband router today. In the future, it's capable of IP. And when Sony, that's all they sell me is cameras that output IP, we'll be ready for it. But that is one of those things that's tough for a legacy facility to make that leap until you really have to. But I'm looking at a Wheatstone or an SSL or an audio console replacement too. That's what I was there shopping. And again, that's all IP. So that's going to change the infrastructure a little bit, where you used to bring all those audio sources back to a patch panel that interfaced into an I/O. Now the I/O goes out to the devices and this comes back via Cat 6, right? So that's probably my first venture into this IP infrastructure change. And we're going to be doing that this year. So that's one of the big projects that we were looking at. So we met with a lot of people to talk about what their standards are, because there are different standards, unfortunately, for that as well. So finding manufacturers that support each other, so you have that interoperability, is always key. So we spent a lot of time really trying to figure out answers to who works with who, what works best in our environment, as we change and move forward. File interchange is always a big problem for us. It's where the telestreams of the world come into it. And in our facility today, everything's file-based, and in most facilities, right? But not all files play the same out of every different server that you find out there. So having that middleware to get a file from MPEG-2 to H.264, maintain captioning, make sure the audio is right. Those are all those solutions that when we go out and we look on the floor, who are the people working together to get those things done and done right.
So a question for you guys. So, you know, we always used to have discussions about, you know, what's the latest acquisition format? Why does this acquisition format matter versus this other one? Is that something that you guys still contend with in that space? I mean, is that still important, less important, more important? I mean, talk a little bit about that in the context of what you saw at NAB.
Yeah, well, acquisition for us as a news environment is completely different than people coming to rent red cameras, right? I mean, we're run and gun, trying to get the story back to the station as quickly as possible in the highest quality as possible over the smallest pipes as possible, right? To be more efficient, fast, and nimble. So the codecs we decide on are all based around that functionality, right? Is how do we make that functionality work? And even when we archive or we take something that was shot in high res that we now need to archive off or store for later use that may not be high res, now we have multiple versions of that same content, that same newscast. There's a high version on the servers, there's a lower version on the servers, there were awards, some middle versions on the servers, so storage becomes a huge problem. And getting to these files from the mezzanine file down to something that's manageable, that you can store for these one-offs or these things that don't need to be that high quality is something we're plagued with. So from the field all the way to archive, we have so many variances of different file formats that we have to deal with based on the need of what that particular story or that footage is needed for.
So it sounds like that's still a problem, I guess, that hasn't been solved. I mean,
Everybody has their own solution, right? So as manufacturers develop these things, everybody has their own standard that works well within their ecosystem.
Even in the
I know
IP
Bob's
world,
chomping, but go ahead.
well, there's
Eric.
still conflicting standards, there's Aspen and Ames, and, you know, we still haven't picked a standard for IP yet. You know, like, really? You know, let's pick one and let's move forward. Manufacturer-wise, it makes it hard to make a real good decision knowing, well, okay, these vendors are here, and some vendors are in both, and some are in neither, and, you know, Audio World's ahead. AES standard is for audio and audio consoles. I'm shopping for the consoles too. We should talk.
Okay. Two for you.
Yeah, so, you know, it's hard when, you know, standards are still evolving,
Yeah.
so.
So Bob,
So we're discussing all of this interoperability, but underneath all this is this concept of like, we have to move the media from this machine to that machine. And this is where I think the cloud makes a real difference, because the cloud takes care of that for you and it's transparent. For example, you're a professor at BU, and you want the kids to be able to do their little news stories and then somehow get them into the news show that you make. You just give them, you just tell them, post this to the cloud from wherever you are, from your mobile phone, whatever you've got, and the cloud will take care of transcoding it to the destination format that's required and install it there. And this is what I think is the real merit of, you know, all of this networking is we don't have so much sneaker netting or people worrying about sort of like all these different formats, but instead we have a higher level of intelligence that takes care of these things, like the analogy you made, like the iPhone. I just got a new iPhone and
it backs up to the cloud.
well, not only it backs up to the cloud, but when I got the new one, all they had to do was to download that image onto my phone. And the truth of the matter is, I had no clue how to make those images. It does it automatically in the background. And I think these cloud services and whatever are going to really proliferate and make a big difference for people, because it's getting too complicated and these clouds can take care of this stuff.
Yeah, and so Microsoft has their big cloud for enterprises. Amazon Web Services has been available and is kind of the big 800-pound gorilla out there in terms of cloud services. Yes.
Jeffrey, I'd just be curious. I mean, everybody's talked about a number of very complex technical changes that are hitting the industry. You know, to what degree are you bringing those changes into the educational experiences?
Great question.
Well, you know, slowly, because it's expensive and we have to watch that factor. But, you know, we've wrestled with what do we really need to teach. I think ultimately, and this is happening at universities all over, is, you know, we don't know what to teach anymore because everything's changing so fast on the technical level. So we fall back on, let's try to give them skills that they can transport regardless of what media it is. So we concentrate on storytelling mainly. visual storytelling, how to use visual language for any size screen, how to understand audio and video connection and relationship. And, you know, we really kind of go back to giving them the fundamentals. It's like, well, if you can devise a great story and work with people who can visualize it, then that's what we give them. Because it's going to go 4K, 8K, 16, you know, it's not going to stop.
So you were out you were at the NAB show, is that right?
Yes.
And what was your goal when you were out there? What were you looking for, if anything, or you just wanted to get an overall sense of what was going on? What was your motivation?
Well, you know, I wear a couple hats. I mean, in addition to being, I'm kind of in the academics, but I also write for TV Technology, and I review products, so they send me around to cover things. I judged for the awards, Best of Show awards, and all that. So I was hunting all over the floor looking at a lot of things. My personal interest is documentary production, so I am looking for tools. So starting at that level, you know, I'm looking for good, inexpensive cameras that offer very good resolution in pictures. And the cool things in terms of what I found that's cool, I mean, you're always looking for that, is, you know, Panasonic has a camera that can see in the dark. It's the ME-20.
What's the ISO on that? Something crazy, right?
It's like 100,000 or something. It's
insane.
And literally, this camera, and I am reviewing it for TV Tech too, you can go into a dark closet and you can pick out your shirts. It sees what we can't see. Now, you know, the question is, what does that mean? And I think it means that, you know, there's really no limit to the advancements of technology, and a lot of it means that we're becoming essentially more mobile. We're becoming untethered from lights, untethered from, everything's becoming wireless and cloud-based and all those things. So it is liberating. It's very liberating. You know, so I take all these little, you know, cool things, and I project 5-10 years down the road, and I realize, you know, it's an idea now. It's going to be something great in the future. So it means lighting is going to change. We're going to need less of it. Maybe we don't need any of it. You can make feature films now with just a flashlight and available light. And,
I mean, you know, that's an interesting observation, and you know, to what extent does the skill of the cinematographer or the videographer, you know, it used to be very important that that person really understood how to use that camera, how to light properly, and so forth. But with, you know, the automation that we're seeing and cameras being able to create magic with auto settings and HDR and everything, does that skill set kind of get relegated to the background now, and the camera is doing a lot of that, or the technology is doing a lot of that?
I would say no. I know that there's a huge political battle going on right now about that very topic, which is who controls the image. So you have a DP who shoots with a really nice camera, and he's shooting raw, which effectively passes on control of the image off to the editor and the colorist and the finishing suite. And I think where a good DP in production, he will try to put his imprint on the final image at that point. And to do that, he will need to use lighting and shadow and perspective and blocking to make it his own image, to put a signature on the image so that the editor can't screw it up, basically. Yeah.
well, you know, I agree with that. It will always be a high art, no matter what equipment we have. And there will always be the difference between somebody who looks at an image and just says, wow, and somebody who looks at an image and says, well, yeah, I get it. And the tools will change, but yeah, we still, a beautiful photograph is hard to attain with consistency. And that's always going to be, it's going to take artistic training and understanding of how all these tools work.
So we don't have anyone, yes, sir.
Does someone who went to art school, my 2 cents about this would be that you're
essentially, you're always working with and against the limitations of your medium. And the big difference with digital is that you can do anything you want. You know, with the old media, and even with more limited digital media, you can actually, choices are made for you, so you can actually work with that and create things based on that. But with digital, if you can imagine it, you can do it. But the difference is you have to be able to imagine it as opposed to discovering it while you're working on it. So.
Yeah, that's an interesting insight. Yeah, thanks.
So one of the things I'd like to transition to, and we don't have anyone on the panel that's a specific audio expert representing audio, but I do want to hear what you folks saw out there in the audio space that was interesting. If you could share with the audience, did you see anything in terms of, again, microphones, sound systems, anything related to audio that kind of jumped out at you?
I think there is more interest in systems that use the audio to switch to video, and particularly for it to be more sophisticated so that it isn't mechanical looking and that it is more responsive and that it be a little bit, that it even be a little interpretative so it looks like a naturally switched show.
I mean, there's so many audio apps now, right? So are the apps taking over in that space? Or is there still that great hardware requirement in audio? John, you got any thoughts on that?
In production, it's really good hardware, and there's definitely that iPhone level of production where it is the app, but for the most part, for high quality field production, it is still really nice microphones, really good wireless gear, and sound production practices.
All right. Sir?
Different category. But what was the post world like at the NAB? Anything new from Avid or Final Cut Pro? Anything?
There's a lot, and we had a whole separate group of people doing just post, which unfortunately I didn't do. But I know we've transitioned to a lot of new storage, we're Avid ISIS now in our whole facility. So we're doing a lot with Avid right now with storage in post. Actually, our whole facility has gone to an Avid ISIS storage with 1.6 petabytes. Yeah, I know, really.
You have a small one.
Yeah, we'll fill it next week, I think. Yeah, we'll never fill it, yeah. But so there's a lot going on in the post world, I think, but I didn't spend much time doing that because we had a whole nother group of people just looking at post.
So did you folks see out there anything related to in terms of post production automation, right? Where you digitize all your video and it edits the video for you, basically using a certain formula. Did you see anything like that? No? See, I'm seeing those on my iPhone. Those apps on my iPhone. So that's why I'm asking.
Okay, so there was this this little camera called the Mevo, which is a Facebook Live camera.
Yes.
And so yes, the idea is that it's a 4K camera, and it's a little nub of a thing like this that sits on the table, and from that 4K field, they're deriving different camera angles that are windowed basically. So you could have the example was a cooking show where you could have a window that was on each of the two cooks, and then another window that showed the food prep area, and another window that showed the oven, whatever. And the idea was that somebody with an iPhone was controlling essentially the output, the stream,
Switching their own
coming
show.
from switching their own show on the iPad or the iPhone. But there was an option for letting it do it all by itself, and it would somehow figure out what the word they used was interesting. What's the most interesting shot at that moment, and it would go to it. So that to me was the first time I saw, okay, so they're trying to use some machine intelligence
Right,
for
and,
editing.
you know, and the overarching term is automation, and we used to use that term to describe, you know, commercial insertion, robotics, and so forth. So what are the trends in automation at the stations? Stefan, what are you guys
I
seeing?
mean, basic playback automation and newsroom automation, they basically sit on their separate islands, but I mean, you have EMPS, which is the newsroom automation, basically is driven off of the MOS rundown that you activate in there. And we interface with VizRT for graphics, so as that rundown moves through, it's inserting and creating graphics on the fly. So that's on the newsroom side. And then Harris Automation on the playback side, which is also integrated into our web streams, so we automate the streams when they go on air. We're working with Watch ABC right now, to where when there's things embargoed, it makes sure they get covered, they don't stream out. Commercial content's being triggered by the network for certain things like MeTV, which is our secondary channel. So it all kind of hinges back for us at the TV station is the automation within master control, which controls all your distribution outside the building, and then the newsroom automation, which controls everything that the newsroom is doing in the production control room.
So what about over at your space there, Emmerich? What are you seeing in that?
For us, automation is mainly the on-air products. So we have 7 channels, 7 streams that all be unattended on automation 24/7 now. But we used to have some, you know, used to be 2 people 24 hours a day. Now it's 1 person at night doing ingest, and there are 7 channels running on automation now. We're using Crispin automation. It's not without its challenges, and we're looking to always make it better. You know, the hardest part is still the human part of it. You know, somebody mistimes a show. It's under time, then it's gonna be black on the air. If it's long, it's gonna be clipped. You know, most of the problems we still have with automation are human error, and that's hard because then you still have to have somebody checking in times and out times and topping and tailing. And so automation is great, but automation is still labor intensive, and we're looking for ways to make that better all the time.
So what about, you know, we know that you guys have the closed captioning center over there.
Yep.
And, you know, what developments in that space to kind of automate captioning?
Unfortunately, the caption center, voice rec, they spell it WRECK. Right, that's what they call it, voice rec, and it's a cheap and very poor way to do. You cannot automate captioning because of the human. There's so many variances in how we speak. So the most, you know, we consider GBH captioning to be the gold standard of our captioning world. And it's still a stenographer at a pad doing the actual real-time, you know, live is hard, right? There's real-time captioning, and there's captioning that's done for post. So all the shows, all the things that are pre-produced, the captioning is done in time and it's perfect, and they edit it and it's just right. Live captioning, there's still, you know, there's a delay, but you can offset the delay. It's still the hardest part. And a human who's very good at what they do, it's a very high, you know, it's a court stenographer on steroids to do live captioning. It's really an art to be able to keep up. And it's the hardest thing in the world is a talk show, because you got 3 people talking, 4 people talking, and they're arguing. Well, what do they type? And then the law keeps changing on what's required for captioning. The hardest thing we're doing today, the hardest part right now, is we're doing a show Tuesday nights live on PBS called Point Taken, and it's aired on Facebook. And Facebook really doesn't want to deal with captions. We're sending them captions, and then they don't know what to do with them. So it's very difficult. Captions is a tough one. There's so many variances. The state of the art keeps changing, but ultimately it comes down to a stenographer at a steno pad for live captioning.
So have there been any attempts by companies to kind of tackle that, to come up with a technology? I mean, you know, up in Burlington is Dragon, naturally speaking, right? You know, and granted,
Voice rec.
Voice rec.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, it only gets so good if you, and it's not there. If you see captions that are done automated, you know. You know, it's like, that's not right.
Well, you know, if you use Microsoft Link and you get a voicemail, you know how bad the translation is when you see the email of that voicemail. It's just awful.
It's going to get to the point where bad captioning will be illegal. No, I'm not kidding, right? The laws keep tightening, and Jerry, you can speak to this, right? The laws are getting tighter where you must provide captions that are relatively in time, including live captions, that, that are spelled correctly, and it's becoming the law.
There are accuracy thresholds.
Accuracy thresholds, right.
Actually, many of the dates are now, the requirements.
It's a big deal.
Where I see a lot of automation on the production side is covering sort of things that are very amenable to it. For example, city council meetings. People really want some sort of automated system to cover those because it's actually hard to get a video person to man that. You have to hire a freelancer once a week. He doesn't want to do it. The budget meeting runs till 1 a.m. He gets a real good freelance gig in Hawaii and he's gone, that kind of stuff. The only thing that is the impediment to automating these isn't really the technology. It's the fact that in the end, they often want a person with judgment there. They want that if one of the city councilors starts heckling the mayor, that he doesn't automatically get the attention, that kind of stuff. So I think the biggest obstacle for automating some of these productions isn't technical so much, it's just a desire for a person to sort of have the last word on what goes over there.
To override the artificial intelligence, override Skynet.
I was actually just curious, so when you do live captions, and then you have to post those to the web, I think you do actually have to correct those to get the
clean them up.
timings.
Yeah, we clean up when we can. If for example, we do captions for CBS, for the news, we do Survivor, so they'll do the East Coast and they'll clean them up for the West Coast. They'll go back and tighten them up and fix them for the second run. So it's an ongoing process to make them better as we go.
To make the point about how big captions have come about, there was a court case that originated out of Harvard right here last year where a handicapped person, through a representative organization, sued the university because they were trying to access lecture content and it wasn't captioned. And the advocacy group wasn't suing to make money out of it, they were suing to get attention to this, because the need for captions isn't just broadcast.
Digital signage, for example, public digital signage, does that need to be captioned? Stuff like that. Anyway.
We try to take the high road at GBH because we kind of invented captioning. We've literally been doing it a long time. So we try to set the standard. Many of our people are on the FCC committees that establish the standards. So we take it seriously, but the connection to NAB is there's a lot of technology out there that is tied to the caption world, a lot of it. And companies are trying to make it, they're trying to make it cheaper, right? They're trying to make it so that everybody can do it cheaper.
Yeah, it seems the speech-to-text piece is the piece that's really hurting.
When that piece falls into place, that'll be a big difference.
Once we get it into some type of a text format or something like that, we can position it, we can auto-timestamp it, there's lots of cool things you can do. But the big piece seems to be promos, all these pieces exactly that just have a dialogue track. And
part of it's wrangling the 5,000 context errors in the English language. That's what they are, context errors.
And then we also do descriptive services too for the blind. So where they put the dialogue in between, like Joe moves to the left and hits whatever. So we also do that. We do all the Hollywood movies. So it's a big part of GBH.
There's a legal mandate on that as well, correct?
Right.
It's increasing. You're actually going to increase the number of hours. So that's the one thing as broadcasters. And the reason manufacturers are out there. The laws that the FCC keep changing create new machines, new equipment that have to be developed in order for us to be able to maintain and move forward and be able to reach those requirements. So again, back to the file formats, all those components, they cannot be stripped away when you go from one codec to another, or you're storing it in archive and you're bringing it back later for air. You got to make sure captioning's there, that the descriptive audio's there, that you have all your tracks of audio still. That's the biggest hurdle, I think, today as a broadcaster, because we've been doing this business for a long time. We know how to get the news on the air. We know how to get the story. We know how to do all that. Now the back end is totally changed from this baseband world into this file IP-based world where there's so many places to break it. You can break it in so many places where you fix, everything's okay except for one thing, now all of a sudden we have no audio. But everything else is working. We got video descriptive, we got captioning, back to the drawing board. What did we do? How did we break it? That's the biggest challenge that I see.
It's really hard
Today.
Every file that goes into Netflix has to be tested. It will not be accepted under their guidelines unless it has been run through a file-based testing system. And at NAB, we saw a big upsurge in interest towards that because people are getting rejected, and we don't like to be rejected, you know? And these young producers and directors are spending their personal, you know, finances to create a document or some device that they want to go, and they bring it to the Netflix or any of the content redistribution people, and they say, it's coming back to you. Well, why? Well, because it failed. Failed what? We didn't know it had to pass. And they go, well, it does. Discovery does it, Netflix does it, everybody does it. GPS does it. It's very similar to what public television did in the 70s. Once Portacox became available, anybody could make a documentary. Public TV magically, mysteriously adopted the most stringent technical rules of all the networks. So it was really hard to get a video documentary on public TV back then.
Interesting. So let's get back to the NAB show in general. You know, in the past we used to comment on who had the biggest booth at NAB. You know, and way back in the day it was RCA or Ampex or whatever. So you know, who are the big exhibitors out there now? Is it Sony? Is it Panasonic? I mean, I haven't been to NAB in some time, so you know, help me understand what the scene was out there and. If
I
you're
was
walking in.
surprised. I mean, someone was discussing the biggies who just was talking within earshot. And they, you know, Black Magic has this huge booth, and you know, all these sort of new technology companies, and they did have very large booths with lots of people in them.
Black Magic did.
Yeah.
Black Magic had a huge booth in comparison to where it came from. I mean, it started very small and it was huge this year. So that was something that definitely stood out. Now, there was also some room on the floor too. There was a couple of spaces where there was nothing there, so I don't know if that lend itself for people to expand a little bit more than they did in the past years, but, you know, Sony always had their footprint in the back corner, and, you know, Avid up in their place, which they bring their stuff all the way to the edge of the floor, so they're always in the hallway blocking everybody else instead of using their space so everyone can get in there. But Black Magic, to me, I walked in, I was like, okay, these guys have grown up.
Now, they're not just appealing to broadcasters though, right? They're appealing to production people and independent producers, and, you know, they're covering the whole shooting match there, right?
They have a little bit for everybody, I think.
Yeah, but I was looking at the product, and they were advertising that their product has streaming output, and it also can record. And by the way, it also has this SDI thing that's for the older people. I mean, the big users now, most of the stuff that is being made today, the objective is to stream it.
But size doesn't matter,
Yeah.
Phil.
What's that?
Size is not the only thing,
no,
because
size
I
doesn't
really try to spend time in the back of the South Hall with the 10 by 10 booths to see what's coming. I really, you know, and I found some cool stuff. Just, you know, wandering and talking to people. I didn't have a lot of time to do it. But there's a lot of small booths with some fantastic ideas. And, you know, those are worth, if you have time, they're worth looking at, you know. And I wish I could tell you the one that I like the best, but I didn't have time to really dive deep. But, you know, there's a lot of booths and a lot of vendors. And, you know, the Sonys and the big players, they always have the marquee booths. They always will. And they're awesome.
Well, maybe they always will, you know, until they don't.
Until they don't, right? I mean, nobody's booth is as big as it used to be.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, let's face it. You know, I know what those booths cost. I used to do that, and it's you know, it's cubic money. It's crazy how much they pay for booth space. But so I understand. But you know, even B&H Photo had like, you know, linear, like 100 feet of booth. You know. It's not cheap, but it's you know, you make a statement when you have a booth at NAB. Black Magic made a statement.
Yeah.
It's interesting, you know, Apple used to have a huge booth,
Right.
one of the biggest, and they've pulled out completely. So that shows
That's
that they are
How
no
long
longer.
ago did they pull out?
Oh.
6 years.
5 or 6 years, yeah.
They couldn't get the booth for free.
The interesting thing that NAB has done, I think, is to sort of collect people in groups. So there's, like this year there was the VR Pavilion, which was in the North Hall, and so they put all of the VR vendors together and presumably gave them some kind of a discount for collecting like that. And then there's, there's like Koreatown and Germantown and
Literally, they had signs.
Switzerland Town. I mean, it was yeah, and
There was a big section of LED displays in the front of the central hall. I've never seen so many, the big video wall, the LEDs,
huge, yeah.
huge
Yeah,
LED.
yeah.
I like, wow, and I actually was shopping for one, so I spent some time there, but I've never seen that many LED wall vendors that this year. It caught my eye, literally caught my eye. There were tons of them. And, they had these big, 30 by 20 foot video walls set up and running. And those prices are, they've gone, a decent dot pitch has gone from $400,000 to, $80,000. So the prices are dropping dramatically on LED walls, so.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
I happened to go to the Canon booth for a short period of time, and Canon was huge. It's the biggest booth I've ever seen at the NAB. And Fujinon had one maybe 100 feet away that was a little smaller. But did you guys get a chance to see the Canon booth or go through it? It was
Yeah,
immense.
I got a luxury tour of it. It was, I think, one of the most impressive booths, definitely the most impressive they've done. And they had spectacular, they had a theater, they had, 8K projection. It was stunning. It was, they had a little bat cave for the camera that can see in the dark. And so, yeah, theirs was right up there among the...
One other company I thought was impressive, I think their booth was significantly larger, was Akamai. I think their booth grew this year and it got close to the front. And I also kind of see like some waves coming. Like I came into NAB through Digital Media World, 20 some odd years ago. And that was a wave that's gotten, subsumed into it. And I kind of think there's another wave coming with these OTT players. Oyala was out in front in a pretty big way. I didn't get a chance to walk the floor at all, but I bet you there was other OVPs and CDNs that are out there, and perhaps it's a wave that's building or it's already hitting.
Well,
A lot of ink in that space.
So it's interesting, the shows, the broadcasting show, National Association of Broadcasters. But let me ask the broadcasters represented on the panel here. Are you guys doing more streaming than traditional broadcasting at this point? And maybe not on a per station basis, but
I mean, as a media company, Hearst is obviously, because we own properties in paper and magazines, so that's something that now has lent itself to being more video-centric. So streaming, creating little blogs with video and things like that, that's the commonplace now for magazines and newspapers in order to stay relevant. For a broadcaster, I mean, we try to put, especially from a news standpoint, we try to put the news out as quickly as we can now. So it may hit the web before it's on a broadcast, scheduled newscast, but it's going to be on that newscast as well. So it's kind of the same, probably the same mix. Everything that you'll see on our newscast, you're going to get on the web, plus maybe some behind-the-scenes stuff. So there's a little bit more. You got more people posting things outside of news that may be a little bit more of a backstory that may catch a millennial's eye as opposed to the traditional viewer. So we're doing perhaps a little bit more than we normally would do, but we stream everything that we do on the broadcast side. So I guess the answer would be yes to not to this full featured finished product kind of thing, but little tidbits of news.
And we don't do live news, right? We don't do live. We do close to live, but no live. So for us, there's a plan for every bit of content to reach every eyeball we can. So the plan for streaming is equal to the plan for broadcast, and for public media especially, because we're not doing breaking news. So we're planning, and there is an entire department. That we have we plan the streaming, we plan the platforms. We partner with Wowza, we partner with all different content providers, with Amazon, with Facebook, and So it's important that our content be streamed and that we're going for the social too. We're going for the interaction also.
But to what extent is it important that it be monetized? I mean, I'm sure that's a big
Eyeballs,
part.
right? You
Yeah.
know, for us, it's branding, right? We don't run commercials, we have funder credits, okay, we all know that.
Okay.
But for us, it's about people watching that they identify with the brand. It's about the brand, it's about people watching it on WGBH, on PBS. So it's a different model.
Yeah.
But the streaming part of it is a part of every plan of every show.
Yeah, I'm curious about the local broadcasters, CBB, BZ, and so forth. Obviously, you can count how many people are tuned in, watching your stream. You know, there's an audit trail there. You can count those eyeballs. Less of a science on the broadcast side, but you use all sorts of surveys and so forth. What's the tipping point, or have we reached a tipping point at this point where more streaming people are tuning in than broadcast?
I don't know the analytics on that,
Yeah.
to be honest, to actually say, but I know that a broadcast viewingship is huge. Even if you can pull analytics on how many page views you have, and I mean, we've hit numbers of billions of page views in a year. I mean, that's a lot, but a 1.4 million market, or 2.4 million viewership in a market, which you're getting every night, perhaps a good portion of that. And that's a big number still, right? So on the broadcast side, and yet our measurement there is the Nielsen ratings, right?
Right.
So that's more of an average, you know, kind of a thing, whereas today, with the right analytics, you can tell exactly who's watching this stuff. It's not as I guess Nielsen is very set in stone, and that's the standard, right? So everybody believes that. There isn't that belief yet in the numbers that you get back from all these different analytics, like Google Analytics, that's who we use. I mean, is that really an accredited number, right? I mean, who's certifying those numbers? Who's the person watchdogging that? You said that you just had 50 million people click on my thing.
Yeah.
That's probably the toughest part for now, for broadcasters to really say, okay, what's that accredited stamp of approval that this is the number that we're getting?
And at radio too, that applies to radio too, because we do radio, and the counting the listeners in radio is a big business also. You know, the Nielsen, the watermarking, the devices that came out last year at NAB, or actually secretly, that say, okay, if you put this device in line, then the personal people meter will count more people, because it'll make it so the meter will hear it better.
Did Volkswagen come up with that?
And you know, and people, and stations were getting like this jump in ratings in a market because they bought the secret box.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, what? Oh, they must have bought the box, you know? So now everybody has the box, so it kind of neutralizes the box, and, you know, so, but it's a game, you know? It's all about counting people, you know?
So in a city of 5,000, you've got 10 million listeners.
No, honestly, it doesn't increase the people listening, but it counts them better. So if I have it and you don't, it's counting more people listening to me than are listening to you.
Got it.
It's very interesting, but.
I'm curious if with the HD digital broadcasting and a lot of people getting rid of cable, if the trend is upward in terms of people, you know, there was a downward trend when everyone was going to cable, people were not tuning into broadcast. Is that reversed? Is that
You
stabilized?
mean over the air?
Over the air, yes.
The
yeah.
last number I heard, Boston has a very low over-the-air number. I believe it's like 4 or 5% get their broadcast from an antenna on the roof. Solely off air. Yeah, so 96% are on some type of cable, satellite, something else. Other markets, it's high 90s, low 90s, high 80s, but Boston is so. I forgot what the question was.
So the question is, if the numbers are that low, how do you justify?
That's still a lot of people, though.
It's still a lot of people, but if in the overall count or analytics, the numbers are that low, how do you justify the expenditure of the next generation broadcasting equipment?
It's very hard. That's a very good question, right? I mean, we're thinking, are the tall towers done, right? Is everything going to be, you know, is this watching TV, you know?
Yeah.
And will the tall towers become cell transmitters, you know?
But how do you justify most carriage?
You still get counted.
That's the one thing
For
that
the
keeps it going.
DirecTVs, the cable carriage, right? So at the end of the day, the media, the content is king, right? So whether I broadcast it over an antenna or if I fiber it to Comcast's head end or I fiber it to DirecTV's head end, I'm getting points for everything that their subs, their accounts, they're paying us for that service. We get credit for those eyeballs. So the distribution may change. The tall tower could go away tomorrow, but WCVB local news would not be going away,
Right.
Because the media, the content is what
The
we.
content's what counts.
I
And the only point I was making
Yeah.
is that when you've got, when you have to upgrade your digital broadcasting plant, over-the-air broadcasting plant, that's an enormous expense.
With
And-
spectrum
and-
auction, we may
and-
have to.
And
Yeah.
can you do it when the viewership is only 4% of your total viewership? So,
I think we're making a mistake in how we're counting these things.
really,
Yeah.
explain.
So, when I was at BNN, we used to have a live show at the Boston Ballet. And it ran live, plus a couple of repeats. And they didn't even care who watched, because they would post it on their website, because YouTube wasn't that popular then. And they reported that they got very large viewerships from that, which they could tell partially from the fact that they could follow them, but also from the inquiries they would get on the Boston Ballet, the ticket sales, and the people who wanted to buy different things or whatever. And they said, first of all, we reached a very different market. Instead of reaching just the people in Boston cable TV coverage, we reach people all over the world. And we also reach people who can watch whenever they want. It's archived on a website.
Right.
And in addition, once they see one program, perhaps they also watch the one from the previous week and the one that aired the week before that. And really this, now that you can publicize all this stuff on social media like Facebook and so forth, I really think sort of like instead of ABC, CBS, whatever, we are really thinking in terms of Facebook, Twitter, these social.
Periscope?
Well, the next big paradigm shift is gonna be over-the-top viewing, direct to the consumer what they wanna watch, when they wanna watch it. We're working on that now, many,
A la carte
viewing.
I wanted to get back to the tower problems. When I bought my house in Las Vegas, one of the stations out there was, I was looking at it off the air, and one of the stations was always blanking out in high winds. And I called the chief engineer, and he told me flatly the company didn't care, that the viewership off the air was so low that they just weren't going to spend the money. It took them 8 years to fix it.
And I get calls from people all the time, when off the air viewing, and we try to service them. I actually have my transmitter guy call the people at home and say, how can we help you get your reception better, because every eyeball's an eyeball.
Yeah, broadcasting over the air is something that we're committed to as broadcasters. I mean, we're gonna go down tooth and nail when they make us shut that thing down. I guarantee it. I mean, that's just who we are. Most of us been in the business long enough to understand
big
that
investment that we
that is a big
maintain.
investment that we want it to work. I mean, if you were to call and have that kind of a problem, why did we spend all this money, even if we haven't added to it to improve it? Why not maintain it at least, right? To make sure.
his honesty.
Yeah.
I didn't appreciate his answer.
Yeah, exactly, right?
I shudder at the notion of government regulation being the only thing that defends my must carry
Yeah.
when the stick goes away.
Yeah.
I think there are some additional, couple of other points to make, and that is, while Boston is the most penetrated cable and satellite telecom market in the country, Transmitter also does provide a feed to a number of the cable providers and other providers who rely on it out there still. And there's always the second string and third string. I'm not talking about the iPad, but the second household broadcast string. That remains, in many situations, an off-air situation. And there's interest all the time in cord cutting. We get the phone calls, people asking us, how do we do it? It's amazing how the knowledge of how to pick up a signal off the air has diminished.
Well, they don't even know we still have an over-the-air signal.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, actually, I'm kind of surprised. Nobody mentioned this year, or was it this year or last fall? There was a watershed in that HBO, you can now get it without having cable for the first time. I was waiting to see who would be the first one to do that. And you can now pay HBO and get it over the internet. And you can get it two ways. You can watch it live as they stream it. You can watch both, there's East and West.
HBO Now and HBO Go.
Right. And you can also do what you were saying, which we do at home with HBO and Showtime, and of course Netflix, which doesn't broadcast at all, where you can see any of their content. And in fact, HBO lets you see stuff that they're not even currently broadcasting, like all of The Sopranos and Oz and all of that. And so you can get that streaming either, over the web. So my question is, when do broadcasters, over-the-air broadcasters, start also streaming live?
Yeah, we are now.
Currently, the
Right
live
now.
signal,
You can watch the 11 o'clock news live,
Correct, yes.
but it's just one program.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, with network programming and stuff, you have all the royalties and rights issues you have to deal with. Watch ABC got installed at CVB, 6 years ago now? 7 years ago now?
The first iteration went in a couple of years ago.
Okay, so we just today had a call where we're now in a validation period because they finally got all the legal stuff behind the scenes to be able to put that programming on the web with all the royalties and all. And we still have embargoed stuff. We're going to still have to embargo certain things. So it becomes not a technology issue. It becomes more of an attorney, lawyer, royalty rights, actors. Yeah, right? I mean, that's really the bottleneck with a lot of what we can and can't do as broadcasters, who are very heavily regulated. I mean, if you look at a broadcaster who's providing you free television, you're talking about all these services, you pay for every one of them. You do not pay a single cent to watch my broadcast over my $1 million transmitter. Right? I mean, you don't pay anything, right? The advertisers, for me, is who's footing that bill, right? But when you have a problem with that service, that's who you should be talking to, right? The guys you're paying that service. And I don't know how many times we talk to Comcast viewers and satellite viewers trying to help them with their systems, because that's what we do, right? I mean, we're broadcasters, we take pride in that. So that's a different world that we live in. The internet's not as regulated to do the over-the-top stuff as a broadcaster is, unfortunately. And we have to be in that space to compete. We know that. That's why we're there.
But I'd assume that when you stream, you'd also stream the commercials, so that the commercials, you'd be getting revenue from that as well.
Yeah, see,
Right.
again, the same thing falls into play with regards to what commercials can we run. You'll watch, even if you watch our live stream, the slate will come up and say, we'll be right back, because that particular commercial that is airing on the air is not allowed to air on the web. So those are the kinds of things we have to worry about when we're streaming to the web. And now we have captioning requirements and all that stuff as well that are now extended out to the web.
Thank you. All right, I want to move things along here. We're kind of running out of time. What I'd like to do is kind of transition to what your pick hits are. All right, so we've got 20 minutes to go here. So starting with Emmerich, pick hits.
I have to totally geek out on this one. I thought about this a lot. So one of my favorite things was in a back room at Belden, and Belden has a single link 4K 12 gig on a single piece of coax. See, I know. I'm weird, but that's impressive. Now, unfortunately, all the boxes are quad link, and so you need 4 cables. But that's a big advance for moving HD on a single piece of coax. That really impressed me. Check out Sony's IP Live. That was a whole workflow that I was very impressed with, from moving content over IP. That was very good. Again, I'm geeking out from the test and measurement. Tektronix had the Prism scope, which you can take RJ45 with an IP signal, plug it into the back of the scope, and there you have a waveform, a vector, and analysis. That's a great tool. So the tools have to catch up with the technology. That one impressed me. And then the stuff I spoke of, some of the ATSC 3.0 demos I watched were very impressive. My ATSC thing is, who's going to pay for it? Nobody can really answer where the money's going to come from to pay for everybody to get new transmitters and new antennas and new televisions, and I don't see the business model. Somebody probably does, but it hasn't been explained to me well yet. So and then the drone thing is cool. I was very anti-drone a couple of years ago. Like, okay, enough already. But it's gotten more of a tool. So those are my favorite things. I'm not, I looked at a lot of routers and DAs and cards that blink lights, and I get excited, but.
Oh,
you
tell
know,
us more.
You know, trust me, you wanna know. You know, the things that I get excited over, very few people understand. So. I looked at 5 companies. I have them rated 1 through 5 now. Now it's a negotiation tool, and you know, how much support. Bruce is waving at me because he represents Utah.
Which was the
10-year.
manufacturer that had the 10-year warranty?
That would be Utah Scientific, yeah. So no, a lot of great stuff every year. You know, NAB. I was there for 10 days, so it's a long run. Because I do PBS TechCon now too. So it was my 26th NAB. I still love going. I learn a lot, I see a lot, and I see all my friends every year, so.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Stefan, what about you? You get any pick hits?
Yeah, I got 3. One of them is really a combination of two companies doing AMT and Vislink. Both have really good solutions that they're working on. I don't think they're fully baked yet, but putting IP connectivity over our BAS band, using LTE technology to kind of connect the station to the truck in the remote field, right? And have it on a dedicated pipe that we control. So quality of service, ramping up bit rates through there, we have control over, as opposed to using the standard internet connectivity or dropping in a high bandwidth connectivity to a location because you're doing something there. So thought that was neat. It was ingenious, and I think the Vislink was like Vislink NewsNet was their product. So if you're looking for something that you can put into a microwave path that you own, it was kind of a neat technology, bi-directional. So Telestream has a new product, their Lightspeed Live server. They have the Lightspeed Stream, so for getting out to the web and capture. It solves a problem for me because I have their pipeline product, which I'm looking to probably update. Again, going back to codecs, as everybody probably knows, and if you don't, Telestream does a lot of work with transcoding files and investigating files and interrogating files and correcting problems with audio and all that stuff. But creating files on the fly to the different formats you need. So similar like variable bitrate kind of stuff for the stream, but also for me for like an archive and a mezzanine level kind of a file, which can be done in real time. Today we record it mezzanine, then we got to run it through processes and re-encode it and put it through. Now it can all be done on a single pass through, which I'm thinking is going to be very cool and streamline a lot of things.
So it helps workflow.
Exactly, exactly. And then the last thing was the TVU has their remote production system. It's using basic standard internet connectivity to bring back remote shots with bi-directional connectivity so you can tally things out in the field. So it's basically live production. Go out there with a couple cameras, you plug into their system, bring it back over to standard internet connectivity, and you have bi-directional IFB control, tally systems to the cameras, bring everything back to the studio, right? Use your control room for everything else and bring back all the cameras live, similar to kind of what, and I wish I would have known it at the time, but when they did the World Cup, all of that was brought back via IP, and I don't know how many people really knew that. And you could have watched every one of the cameras that came back to the States at any time by just clicking on the URL for that particular feed, and they mixed all that stuff back here. I thought that was pretty cool to hear about, but I wish they would have publicized it more. I think a lot of us would have probably tried it. And that's probably why they didn't do it. They didn't want it to bring it to its knees, right? All of us trying to hit this thing. But it proves the technology about video over IP and that you can synchronize everything. And it was a pretty impressive demonstration. So.
Were there any hybrid news trucks out there, electric-powered news trucks? I know in the past we've talked about news trucks and some of the unique features that they announced. You see anything crazy in that space?
No, I mean, everyone's moving towards the onboard Amgen kind of off the alternator kind of powering systems. Battery-powered systems, we've had a bad experience. not CVB, but within our group. So we want to make sure that that's truly baked. There's a lot of heat problems when you deal with nothing but battery controlled systems. And not to say that it's not going to get there, but I think what we as a standard now have really, as far as power goes for a remote vehicle, is the onboard, alternator generator solution to get away from those.
No solar panels on the roof?
No solar panels just yet.
Yeah. Jeffrey, what about you? You got any pick hits that you want to talk about?
Well, I'll mention a couple. of the geeky little things. Somebody mentioned the back booths sometimes being the more interesting ones, and I found this this guy who invented they're soft lights that have a color meter built into them. So you turn it on and it automatically balances to the prevailing color in the room. I thought that was pretty cool. So you just turn it on and it matches the color, no gels,
Automation.
no dialing. And they're cheap. So you might want to learn about that. I'll tell you about it. It's called soft panels. Another one was, I just saw a lot of cool robotics. I see a lot more of that happening. So instead of dollies, you just get this thing you control with remote control. There's a lot of that going around. One was a panel that I went to that it's a little bit off in a different direction, but it was from the point of view of advertising. So the CEO of Saatchi & Saatchi was talking about how the models they use to advertise on the internet, you see them all the time. You get these pop-ups. You were looking for a lawnmower last week and suddenly you're getting hit by ads for lawnmowers. Well, they're trying to now figure out a way to get that into television. And the next set-top boxes that are going to be coming down the road, and they said 3 to 5 years, would gather information on individuals just like the internet does. We all leave this trail behind of our purchases, our likes, our vacations, what we read, what we buy. So they collected information from Facebook, and then they made 100,000 customized advertisements for viewers, and they would automatically hit the right ad for the right person. So it's one-on-one advertising. So I thought that was interesting, as the computer world merges with the television world, this data gathering and advertising is going to start to merge as well.
They're actually doing that now. If you're, if you're on your iPad, for example, and you've got Amazon favorites or a wish list,
Right.
they'll pop those into whether it's a Channel 5 stream or some other news stream you may be watching. I'm not sure how they do that, but it's pretty amazing.
Well, they even customized ads. They made ads that had different beginnings, middles, and ends for each person that was viewing.
Yeah.
So I thought that might be interesting how that plays out over the next years with television.
Anything else you want to mention before we move on to Bob here?
I'm done.
Okay, Bob, tell us what your pick hits were.
Well, the thing that I think will end up having been the most significant thing is actually an old technology, which is these NDI, RTSP video streaming things over internet. I think that it is really significant because this year it just seemed to me that everyone is, a large number of manufacturers are sort of adopting this. It's a little bit like going from black and white to color television or standard definition to HD. It sort of happened in one moment where you could see the consensus. And I think that consensus happened this year. And I think it's very significant because essentially video has been defined by facilities with these coax cables, and now it's going to be defined by Ethernet, by your local LAN. And it'll have a big impact in who designs the facility, how they think of it, certainly how far its reach will be. It'll reach out much further. And I think this is a turning point.
So Russ, take note that Bob Lamb didn't include broadcast picks in his pick hits. All right, just make note of that.
We do make compatible things.
All right. Mr. Rule, I know you have a list there somewhere.
I do indeed.
Let's hear it.
So, boy, where to even start? I'll start with the ARRI Sky Panel, which is a absolutely gorgeous 2 foot by 1 foot LED soft light. And to what I was talking about earlier, this light came out last year at NAB and everybody loved it. It was fantastic, beautiful quality of light. This year they came up with a complete firmware update for it that you could plug in a USB stick, and now it does incredible variable color, including if you're a DP and you have a favorite Roscoe color, you just plug that number in and it gives you that exact Roscoe color. And and it's bicolor too, so if you've got it set for 5600 Kelvin, it will look as if that Roscoe color is on 5600 Kelvin, or if you've got it at 3200, it'll look as if it was that Roscoe on 3200. Really cool. And of course, free of charge for the upgrade. DJI, to speak of drones, for $6,000, a 6-rotor drone that can carry, maybe 12-pound payload. So an Epic, Red Epic with a small lens on it, and
What's
really
the flight
pretty
time on
compelling.
that?
12 to 15 minutes, something like that, depending on the temperature and the ambient temperature.
Yeah.
But for that kind of money, really, really impressive.
Do you guys rent drones? Are you in the drone rental business, or just?
That would be disastrous, I think. My insurance company has advocated strongly against that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Probably a good idea.
I mentioned earlier, I think blue shape batteries, which you can use an app to talk to through a wireless connection, and you can actually look at all of your batteries to see what condition they're in and how much runtime they have left. And then from a rental house perspective, I've never heard of this before, but it was kind of cool. I can program the batteries to shut themselves off at the end of the rental period. So,
Wow. Do you have a
that's
credit
cool.
card swipe?
That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. So,
Swipe.
Plug in a square reader.
Yeah, square.
So for that one customer who says, I'm not shooting over the weekend, really I'm not. Okay, fine, I'll just make sure the battery doesn't run over the weekend. There was...
That's number one on your list, too.
It's just interesting, I would never do it.
Is it old then?
Yeah. So Sony had a HTC 4800 camera, which is high-speed, 480 frames per second in 4K to a server, so you can basically record an entire live event, up to 4 hours, I think, on this server. And I thought that was pretty cool so in essence, using something like a Phantom for a live event, but being able to record the whole event and going back to it whenever you want. Shogun had a number of small monitors, really high bright, that you could do. They're monitor recorders, HDR capable, really nice UI for navigating through that. $2,000, 7-inch monitor, 4K, 60p, really great stuff. And then the one thing I do want to mention, and I'm surprised that nobody's been talking about it, is the Lytro cinema camera.
The light field camera, right?
The light field camera, which was sort of, I think, the most significant technology I've seen at NAB in years. And it was, it was described to me as a Scud missile of a camera at one point, and it's, it's this massive thing. And I think they only announced and showed it at NAB because they were preparing for a C round of financing and they wanted to get that credibility. But clearly it's something that 5 years from now is going to be a tremendous product. And basically the idea is that you are capturing not just a flat image, but you're capturing depth information of the entire scene before the camera. And so once the camera, using this light field array, once the camera understands the Z depth in a room, you can make incredible choices in post, like, for instance, being able to do a small dolly move after the fact in post, because the camera and the computer knows where everything is, and so can adjust parallax and perspective as you do a small move in the computer. So it's like computational photography. And another example is that you can actually, with this one camera, you can get perfect 3D because you can effectively choose one eye and the other eye after the fact, and you can adjust parallax there too if you wanted. So we were talking earlier about you know, what is the job with a DP, and in a way, with a camera like this, at some point, that job is going to be moot. I mean, it's going to be the guy who sets it up and turns it on, because in a light field situation, you know, you can control everything: depth of focus, exposure index, blocking to some degree, and there's an incredible resolution, so you can control composition as well. You know, there will be no end to what you can do with the image after the fact. Again, we're still years away.
Are they the only ones doing anything in that space?
Yeah.
Is that the system that also eliminates green screen?
Yes, because, and really beautifully too. So because, again, all the depth of every object in the room is known, you can very easily just drop out. I can have Marty right here in the frame, and I can drop out everything around Marty with no green screen whatsoever. And
You probably want to do it the other way around.
Never.
That's the potential, I think, to change a lot of things.
Yeah, for VFX companies in particular, it could be a huge game changer.
John, you remember years ago at NAB, there was an Israeli company, I believe, they came up with Z-Cam?
Yeah.
No, is it anything like that? Because that was taking, had the Z information, and they were when everybody else was creating virtual sets with green screens and so forth.
Yeah.
This company, Z-Cam, was doing it without any green screen, any keying.
Do you remember how that was done?
I was hoping you would remember.
Yeah.
Poor JVC actually had a camera that did that a long time ago.
Really?
You could select the distance and it would make it as if there were a green screen after that. And they never got any attention for it. Those poor guys, they never got attention.
Those poor guys.
What else have you got there, John?
So that is mostly it. You know, just for fun, because I didn't expect to see a product like this at NAB. Blackmagic had this thing called the duplicator, which, you know, it's for weddings maybe, or events, and the idea is that you shoot 4K and you're editing live and you're coming up with a finished product by the time the event is over, and you've got this duplicator thing that has 25 SD card slots in it, and you dump the program to the SD cards, and then you sell them. You sell the SD cards or hand them out to the audience members as they leave. And it's kind of a cool idea, you know, a potential business model. And you can stack these things up, so you know, 50, 100, whatever, depending on the size of your event. And it was just kind of a cool, different NAB product, so I like that one. And then that's about it.
Oh, you got one more there somewhere.
Yeah, the Ari Artemis Trinity was the only other thing that...
It's worth mentioning just because of the name.
Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? And it's another camera, you know, over the last couple of years we've seen endless amounts of gimbals. And so this is a kind of a different take on a gimbal, because it's a pass-through device, so you can have as long a camera and lens combination as you want. But that was encircled by, so it's circled by the gimbal, and then there's a long pole attached to the gimbal, and then the long pole is attached to a Steadicam arm.
Which from a drone.
Yes. Right, and the guy's hanging from a helicopter.
Yeah.
But the idea is that now the camera is completely, within a 6-foot radius around the operator, this camera is completely free to boom up and boom down and spin around and maintain level horizon, and just an amazing device. Cool. I was actually too frightened by it to ask what the price was, but I imagine, you know, it's going to be $50,000 or so.
All right, last thing here, predictions. You know, everyone here has talked about the trends being, you know, IT, IP, VR to some extent. So what's the predictions for next year's show? Any breakout technologies that you guys see on the horizon there? Emmerich?
Actually, I said this 2 years ago and it hadn't happened, but I'm still concerned that the breakout will be the security of the IP systems. We haven't had any problems yet, but you know, IP security is going to come to roost eventually with this whole thing, and something's going to get crashed and compromised, And I'm really concerned still that there's an angle here, there's a lot of bad people, and somebody's gonna find a way to get in and really be a disruptive force and a very expensive thing to deal with. That's a real concern of mine that will be coming. I think it's gonna come, I hope not, I hope I'm wrong again.
Okay.
But I'm very concerned about the security of the IP systems.
Bob?
I think just as our entire infrastructure moves to, IT type of stuff, we're just gonna see an acceleration of the products. I mean, we're sort of used to seeing this on the phone, just, the apps are updated every, month or two. I think there will just be an acceleration in progress.
Firmware.
Yeah.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, I guess if I were to make a prediction, I would say it's going to be a continuation of menu-driven consumption, and people will watch what they want to. There will also be, I think, more new, like Vimeo is starting to produce their own original content, so we're going to see a lot more of that, just very individualized consumption.
Stefan?
I think for a broadcaster, it's going to be in the IP space. Security is a big thing for us. But reaching all those platforms, and those platforms becoming, I hate to say this, but more like television. That user experience of getting from one thing to the next, and that's something that everybody's trying to achieve. Alchemy, I'll tell you, we need to get that viewing experience to that end user on all those devices more like television. When you move from one to the next, it's there, it's there, it's there. The buffering's got to come down. You got to make that experience much better than it is today, and it's just getting better. It's going to happen. It's just going to get better and better.
And John?
So my prediction would be a really easy one, because in the last 8 years, we've seen a number of developments that peak and trough, starting with HDSLRs in 2008, seeing them come out the first year very tentatively, and then the next year, every single person is walking around with these huge rigs that are like, and then 3D, seeing how that came in, started slow, peaked and dropped. Drones, seeing how that came in a little bit slow, and then still peaking. And I think VR this year was very much like any of those were in the first year, where small localized groups of people doing these things, relatively low technological thresholds. And but next year, I'm sure we're going to see double the resolution on some of the headsets, and I'm sure we're going to see much easier tools and much better workflow and editing all the way through the process.
Yeah. So my prediction is along those lines. I agree with VR. So I ride the subway every day, and I observe the people on the trolley here, and they all get their mobile devices. They're all looking down. No one's paying attention to anyone. They're just tuned in. Yeah. Next year, everyone's going to be wearing headsets. So anyway, thank you very much for being on the panel tonight. I think it was a great discussion. Thank you, audience, for being here. Any last words, Marty?
I also want a hand for our moderator. He is a great interlocutor. Great, thank you.
Take a group picture.
Yes, we'll take a group picture.
We also have one little thing. You guys have noticed there's little brown boxes in front of you. None of you have been curious. The SMPTE elves have been very busy, so please open your little brown boxes.
Mine's empty.
This came all the way from Las Vegas, from the NAB convention. We thank you on behalf of SMPTE. Hey, how you doing? Shake your hand and mark the moment where I can say that I'm actually a Telestream customer. I just bought a
no,